Hey, Renter Retires, it's Adam Schroeder here with another episode, joined as usual by Zach Lemaster, the founder and CEO of Renter Retirement. And we are pleased to be joined today by the head of Avail, Matt Eatherton. We are here to talk property management because it's it's a necessary part of the business, but not the most fun or the sexiest part of the business. So, Matt, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Good to be here, and happy Halloween. Hopefully, nothing spooky today.
Well, let's talk about, let's start at the beginning. How did you get into real estate and what kept you in the real estate space?
Good question. I probably am unlike a vast majority of your audience, but I'm definitely passionate about this space. So I'm what's considered an accidental landlord. In 2006, my wife and I bought a property here in Chicago. We had an opportunity to move to California in 2010. And at that point was kind of between a sell and a do something else decision. Unfortunately, in that market, the 2010 market, the sell scenario was just not a real wise choice. So we decided, hey, what about that whole landlording thing? We decided to jump and leap into that water. And I think from 2010 to about 2018, while we were renting it out, I would be described as the not so savvy prop tech user who was using a lot of old school methods to manage the property and also had a real estate agent and a property manager helping as well. That's until I met the founders of Avail in 2019, and my rental property and effectively my career changed a whole lot at that point.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, have you, let's be honest, what I just said, property management is not interesting. Well, it's not that it's not interesting. It's not fun. Why on earth would you stay in the property management space? Because everybody loves and hates their property manager at some point. So why would you get into the property management space?
Yeah. So just to kind of carry this story forward a little bit, when I met the founders of Avail, Ryan and Lawrence, and frankly discovered that there was a solution to a lot of my pain points in 2019, automatically transferred and kind of accelerated my career and passion for this space. So nothing against my real estate agent or my property manager at the time, but I'm what's described as kind of a tech entrepreneur, and efficiency and automation is kind of my MO and my game. And as I started to learn more about Avail through the founders, I discovered that there's just so much more efficiency that you get out of using a platform as a single tool. So my passion for property management started there. We've basically grown to a point where nationally we have over 100,000 active landlords and their renters being serviced on our platform. And the beauty of Avail is you get all of the services that a real estate agent or a property manager would offer, but within a single platform, and you can do it yourself. I could walk through those examples and use cases in the future, but for me, the pain point to solve was to not have to use all these disparate tools on my desktop, my phone, also to not have to pay additional fees for a real estate agent or a property manager if I could just do it myself. And that's kind of where the passion for property management was born for me.
Yeah, Matt, as Adam mentioned, it's management is not one of the sexy things about real estate, but in my opinion, it's the most essential, right? And it's really, really hard to find a good property manager. It's also really hard to self-manage. I think a lot of our audience and newer investors, Adam and myself included, and sounds like you as well, start by self-managing the properties. And at least in my case, I soon found out that like I'm not a good property manager, right? And I, just without any tools and resources. And then when I brought in, I was too easy on tenants. I wasn't screening them appropriately. I was not really tracking things. If I was, it was on a spreadsheet and it was disorganized. I like really hated tax time because that means I had to go back there an entire year and look through everything. And it was really just not ideal. I wasn't operating a business. And that's something we try to inform people about early on is when you're investing in real estate, even if it's a side hustle, even with your first deal, the tools and systems that you can put in place are really essential to truly operate like this, like a business. And that's, I think, the approach you should take, because that allows you to have a more productive property, be more efficient. And as you were saying, it's all about efficiency is key, right? Like your time is best spent on growing your portfolio, optimizing your portfolio, focusing on your family and your career path. And so anything that can make management more efficient and easier makes real estate investing a heck of a lot more productive and just more palatable, I think, for the average person. And when I did hire on my first property managers, it's the same thing. Like, I had terrible property managers. It's really hard to find a good one. And so I was kind of stuck for a long time in this no man's land of, I don't want to self-manage. I'm not a good manager. I can't for the life of me find a good property manager. Like, what are the other options out there? So I think you guys are really a pioneer in the property management space, bridging the gap between allowing, self-managing, but also having the tools and resources available. So you could do that, right? With operating like a professionally property management team. I mean, is that kind of the vision of Avail? Or maybe talk to us a little bit about, the foundation of it, and, what kind of your guys' like mission statement really is to help. Is it the individual landlord, or talk to us more about that?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, our mission statement can be very, very succinctly defined as we help you find, manage, and retain renters, very simply. And at the core of it is the technology and the automation that enables you to do that. And I think a lot of what you said, Zach, resonates with me a lot. When I was looking at my scenario back in those early days of my prop tech coming of age, if you will, was I saw the real estate agent and the property manager doing things that I thought were inefficient. I thought I could do things better, more efficiently. But then even as I started to take over some of those things, I looked at myself and I said, I'm not doing things so efficient, and there are ways that it can be done better. And what Avail strives to do is kind of be that middle ground where we have the workflows that are kind of the best of both worlds that make it super, super efficient and easy. And I could talk about a lot of those use cases if you want to dig into them. But I think you mentioned another kind of aspect of this or you started to go down a path that I wanted to mention, which is like the trust factor. I think one of the things that we see when we talk to a lot of our renters and landlords is there's a perception in the industry that potentially landlords are not the most fair. They're kind of given a bit of a villain type of persona by renters. And what we strive to do at Avail, and the reason why I love the product, is because it gives me kind of that professional look and feel, where I can have my own public website. I can display the fact that I've got an LLC. I've got really tight leases that have, agreeable language and, vetted by law firms. And I've got automation to make it easy for the renter. I think when renters see potentially the individual person that doesn't have like the professional component behind them, or if the renter sees even some of these other third parties that help, they kind of immediately go to a place of lack of trust. And I think Avail kind of fits that sweet spot for me, where out of the gates, renters who find me and my property know that Matt has been doing this for over 15 years and have a ton of positive feedback from my renters, and have a whole system and framework to make me efficient, but more importantly, to make things more efficient for the renter.
Yeah, that's a very huge point, because I look at it like your tenant is your partner to some degree, right? And I think if you focus on that kind of mindset, I mean, at the end of the day, they're buying your property for you, right? Now, tenants can also have challenges, but the easier you can make it for people to lease your property and rent from you, the better the experience is going to be, right? The better the experience is going to be for both you and for the tenant. So if you can improve through efficiencies of the ability to pay rent, to have maintenance items done, and do all these things, that is going to just overall have a better experience for the tenant, you're going to have a more successful overall experience, have a longer term tenant, and have a more productive property. I do want to dive in, Matt, into some of the more details about Avail and some of the specifics that you guys actually offer. But one thing I want to discuss first is just simply about the ability to invest out of state. Most of our investors, I mean, and I think a lot of investors, when they're kind of going from that really beginner stage to the intermediate stage where they're kind of scaling, are looking to invest across the country in different locations. And one of the big fear points is like, it's not local to me. It's too daunting to invest out of state. How do I invest in this property across the country? And how do I can't self-manage that, or they have the limiting belief that I can self-manage it, or it's hard to find management. Talk to me about before we get into the details of Avail, just do you have landlords that live in different areas from where their properties are? And like, how do you set them up for success and kind of break down that barrier for them?
Absolutely. I don't have exact stats for you, Zach, but there are a large percentage of our landlords that live in a certain location where their property is not, or properties. For me, the use case that the way I describe it is I work in Chicago, but I live about 12 miles-ish from my property. To me, that's no different than being 2,000 miles away in California. I can use the software now. I think the last time I stepped foot on my property was probably a year ago when I was going through a transition. But I have no need to anymore because I've got the software helping me with that. So again, we'll get into those use cases in a little bit, but the amount of time I spent on the platform, on Avail, and also on property is in single digit hours per month. And I don't feel like I physically need to be there. So we do enable this kind of remote or hybrid type of model of landlord who has an appetite to invest anywhere in the country. Avail exists only with the United States today, but no matter where your property is, you can manage it from the platform. And we've got a lot of connections and integrations, if you will, to make that easy. I think one of the biggest things is messaging, right? You're kind of always dealing with this omnipresent need to have an open line of communication with your renter, just simply to set expectations and know what's coming, et cetera. So when it comes to things like, submitting tickets that are a two-way ticket for the maintenance that is coming up for HVAC or for plumbing, et cetera, or if it's an automatic notification that, hey, reminder, your rent is due, or if it's a notification that your lease is renewing in 3 months, and let's start to have that conversation. These are all things that the platform does for you, and it doesn't create this scenario where you feel like you need to have another communication channel and figure out what that last message was. It's all there within the product, and we do, frankly, most of it for you.
Yeah, and I will say kind of what what Zach was talking about with property managers as a personal story. I had to fire one manager because I found out I actually ended up talking with one of my tenants. They got my phone number somehow, and they said, "Hey, I really like living here, but they only take checks or cash, and I have to drive 30 minutes out of my way every month to drop off the rent because they won't let me do it online." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's not helping. That's not going to keep my tenants in place longer." So just you never know. It's kind of the you never know what they're doing that you don't know about, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my use case too, Adam, which is my property manager was doing things that I saw as inefficient, and I knew that was being translated to me in terms of cost. Really, the name of the game for property managers is to constantly think they should be thinking about their automation so that they can increase their margins and or reduce their fees. But if I don't see that happening, I'm going to be the first to fire them and do it myself, because that all comes back to me in the bottom line. And I think, Zach, you were alluding to that before. Our thought process or thesis with Avail is long term is we want to make this the most capital efficient asset that you have across your entire portfolio. And I think in order to do so, by eliminating that 1 month's rent to pay an agent to go find and fill that unit, or if it's to pay 10% to go get that property manager to manage it throughout the year, we think that those costs could be wiped out and reduced to something very, very fractional of that with a platform like Avail. And that ultimately will come back as, IRR and equity to you in that property in the long term as an investor.
I think that's really the key point to discuss, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Matt, because and I don't want to crap on property managers too much, because there's some good ones out there.
A hard job.
It's we certainly have some very good ones that we found, but it's a difficult thing to do. But I think kind of the bigger point is not even if it's about necessity, about not being able to find a good property manager for a lot of people. I think there's an opportunity. What you just very nicely explained is that, if you want to increase ROI, increase your net cash flow, and your increase your return on the investment overall, like there is a version of this, and this is kind of this new age of like with technology, and you guys are the leaders in it, about being able to actually self-manage efficiently, where you're not pulling your hair out because the systems and software is already there in place. And increase the performance of the property, not only from an efficiency standpoint, but from the fact that, you're not having to pay all these leasing fees. If the average management in the, wherever is 10% or what have you. I mean, that's significant, right? If you got a $3,000 a month rent, I mean, that's $300, right? That you could increase your ROI, and that's not even including the additional, um, leasing costs and things like that. So you can actually make, a moderate cash flow property, rather attractive just through, possibly self-managing and do it in an efficient manner where you don't have to pull your hair out. I mean, so I just really enjoy that you brought up the numbers standpoint, because as an investor, we're always concerned about cash flow and
Yeah.
efficiency and overall return on investment, right?
And Zach, I think one of the thing to point out too is like, I think anytime there's switching costs with doing something that you're used to today to something new, there's going to be a lot of friction and concern and anxiety with that. And we've talked to a lot of landlords about that. And again, to your point, there are a lot of great real estate agents and a lot of great property managers who can fill those needs. And we're very happy to support our landlords who want to use those. I think the key thing to point out is that it doesn't have to be so scary of a proposition to try it out. Someone who has, let's say, 200 doors, you don't have to add all 200 doors to a platform like Avail. You can start with one. You don't have to add that one door and use all of the features. You can start with one use case and one feature. We have a lot of landlords who will just simply use us for the marketing component. They'll come to Avail to easily syndicate their listing to 20 sites and get the listing in front of billions of renters just to get those leads and work them. And they prefer to meet them and put them through a tour process and eventually get them into a lease. But after that, they just don't want to deal with the maintenance. And maybe they've got a great property manager who they're okay with being a little bit, not ROI positive on the management side of things, but prefer to market it and lease it themselves. So there's lots of different varieties and mixtures of how you can engage in a platform to help automate it. And it doesn't have to be all one big scary leap.
Yeah, that's so true, right? Like just a trial, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you just have firsthand experience with it, like, oh, you could find out. Like I think about that the same case with so like some of the new construction properties that we sell, we're talking about people that want these tax advantages and they have to self-manage and do. And then this is applicable here as well, right? Like if you want to do things like cost segregation studies and these accelerated depreciation, like to either get real estate professional status or to rent the house out as a short-term rental, you need to have self-management involved in that in a lot of ways. And so like this is a way that you could potentially get your tax advantages going through self-management, but also trial it out. Because, and just to be clear, Adam will stop me because I'll get on my soapbox and go down this rabbit hole. But, it's all about the first year you put the property into service. So if you buy a property this year, like you have to self-manage it in many cases to be able to qualify for, your cost seg. And then the next year you can turn over management if you want, but like you're almost forced into that. So this is like, that could be one example, but the point is that you could trial the software and see if it's something, like actually see firsthand that, oh, it's actually not that difficult, not that bad, and possibly even better. And then another thought that came to mind when we're talking about fees is just like also management contracts and, not having, costs to break those sometimes. I mean, that's another thing, right? So I'm all about trialing things out and finding what works for you. And you guys do a great job of making that accessible to really anyone. Matt, let's talk about the actual software now and like get into the nitty gritty, because I'm sure people are thinking, oh, this sounds great. Like, what do you guys offer though? Like what specifically are we talking about and what services does Avail offer so people can kind of understand, oh, this is possible for me to self-manage even from a distance?
Yep. High level, you can think about the whole rental journey in kind of a linear flow, if you will. And we can kind of talk about it from the happy trail where you're just starting off with a brand new property and you need to simply find renters, right? So the first product is our listings product. That's the product that allows you to syndicate to a lot of the great sites to then get those renter leads, which then you work through your own system of lead development process. And then you're transitioning to the next component of the software, which is screening or application. So it's about taking those 50 leads and identifying the 4 or 5 who really seem to have high intent. They've gone and done a tour with you, and you're putting them through a screening product that's all digital and secure and integrated with TransUnion to get their credit background and eviction reports. And then once you're identifying that renter that more than likely is going to rent your place, then you're moving on to the leases product, which is where you can create a custom digital lease. You could use your own. Either way works, but the point is it's all digital and it's an e-sign functionality. You send it out to your renters, they sign it, they return it back to you. And then boom, because Avail knows that your rent is going to be $2,000 a month for 12 months, we automatically populate that kind of schedule of charges, if you will, in the payments product and allow a really easy way for the renter to connect their bank account, the landlord to connect their bank account and exchange those funds on time. And then lastly, while you're going through the maintenance and the accounting of the property, the feature I was mentioning before, when issues come up or you just have regular maintenance, you're using that feature to create those tickets, sharing photos, putting the costs behind them, etc. And what happens kind of underneath all of these features at Avail is like a lot of that messaging functionality that we talked about. So you're constantly keeping in touch, you're sending reminders, you're giving advance notice, those types of things. But then also the accounting tool. You mentioned at the end of the year, kind of that pain point for us all. And what Avail does is makes it very easy for all of that information to kind of funnel into a dedicated area within the product that allows you to export the data to your accountant or CPA. So all your rent, all your income, all of your expenses from your maintenance, et cetera. So it really is turnkey end-to-end software with those core features in mind. There's a whole bunch of other features that I could talk about as well, but just to re-accentuate my point, you can start anywhere in the process. You can use any one of the features. You don't have to use them all, and you can use them all for free. There's no requirement to pay for Avail. The only thing that requires you to pay is if you want to use the premium product for a handful of features. So my use case when I found out about Avail was I already had renters in place. I already had a lease from my attorney. I was already collecting payments through mail and paper checks. I just thought there was a better way. So I simply just went to Avail. I signed up. I uploaded my lease. That's all I had to do. Avail automatically created the payment series and made it very easy to connect to the renter to connect their bank account. So then all of a sudden I got rid of paper checks. And I was like, wow, that was really efficient. And now I'm getting rent on time every month without having to communicate or put a stamp or drop something off of the mailbox, et cetera. So, or my renter's not having to. So hopefully that gives a good picture of the software and potentially how you can use it.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that I messed up whenever I self-managed was I picked the property that was already a problem and chose to try to start with that one. So my advice to people, if they're going to try something like this, is pick the easy one.
Yeah.
Don't jump into the deep end, kind of wade in, right?
I like that.
Yeah, maybe don't start with the problem ones. But I was just having trouble with my property manager and thought, I can do this better than them. And the answer was kind of, but it was an absolute nightmare. So pick the easy one so you can work into it. I really loved when we were talking when we met, was that kind of, you mentioned the lease factor. I always, like, whenever I needed to do a lease, I was like, I'll just Google, what's a lease, a legal lease, or, going and trying to find something that looked legitimate in the thing. And y'all actually have, what's the word I'm looking for? Real lawyers doing it, if I recall correctly. So I love that part, because as somebody who's, doesn't have a team of lawyers behind me, or, the property managers having the legal, lease for that state and that municipality possibly, it was nice to hear that. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I love the thoughts. And I think that's the kind of an omnipresent theme for our product and use case as well, which is kind of the compliance aspect. So Avail is owned by a public company named News Corp, and Realtor.com specifically, our parent company, is very, very passionate and invests a lot into fair housing. And we know that fair housing is not only a buy-sell type of topic, but it's also a rent topic as well. So we've done a lot of homework. We've invested a lot in regards to compliance. And to Adam, to your point, there are very few national law firms, but we did partner with one that has attorneys in all 50 states, such that we have leases that are reviewed and curated and vetted by them every year, so that they're on top of all those local laws and regulations. And it doesn't just stop with leases. This also includes other areas of the product like screening. There are a lot of local laws and regulations, depending on where your property is, that you need to be aware of. And Avail takes a lot of that guesswork or anxiety out of the equation, because we, for example, don't ask for credit for criminal reports in some geos because it's against the law. So there's a bunch of other use cases like that, but I think that's an important one.
I mean, that's to me for the DIY landlord. And I'm just thinking about back of my own experience because I was doing the same thing as Adam, just kind of winging it, like scrambling to find a lease, and like certainly didn't have a pay to have an attorney review it, right? But I wasn't familiar with the local laws and regulations. That
that it was legal.
Yeah, exactly.
That could be a liability, though, right? I mean, that's
and
it's not a problem until it is, but I mean, that could be. I think for the DIY landlords, especially if you're diversifying in different states, like you need a CYA, right? You need to make sure you're doing things on the up and up, and that's always changing. That stuff is always changing. So I think that's a crucial point and a benefit. And did I hear you say that people can sign up and use the majority of the platform for free? I mean, is that for like a trial thing?
Yeah, exactly. You can experience all of Avail. You can get value out of all the features 100% for free. There are a handful of features that require you to upgrade, but they're customizations and you don't necessarily have to use them. So we really want you to get value out of something and get that magical moment. And if you choose to upgrade, that's certainly up to you.
Yeah, that's great. I think, and I do want to preface all this, guys, with saying that, like, even though Avail has all this great software, like, a lot of it has to come to property class. Just from my opinion, too. Like, if I be conscious of where you're buying properties. This is why we focus on A-class assets, brand new construction homes that are in sought after areas that have limited maintenance and will likely attract quality tenants as well. But if you're in a really like low income area, or the house is it's in dire condition and it hasn't been upkept, like Avail is not going to fix those problems, right? I mean, they could potentially help you fix them over time, but I think my point is being conscious about just investing in good locations where you can set yourself up for success, not only with the right tools and systems in place, but also with right property locations. Matt, I got a couple specific questions for you. So do you ever, and this is around screening, do you ever have to meet the tenant if you're using Avail? Do you ever have to meet the tenant in person for any reason?
Not if you don't want to. I personally, as a landlord, choose to meet my prospective tenants by virtue of touring. We make that very easy with a scheduling feature, which allows me to create a block of time where renters can sign up for 20, 30-minute increments where I can meet them there, and it's all handled through the software. But there's no requirement to do that. Ultimately, if you want to send out a digital application and screen that renter, they're going to fill it out digitally wherever they are. You're going to get that information when it's complete. And if you want to make a decision based on that information alone, you're welcome to do so and go straight to leasing.
Okay, thank you for that, because that would be essential for people that are from a distance, so, right? It'd be unrealistic for them to be able to meet their tenants, of course. But what about eviction? So if you screen tenants with a system and properly, you will have significantly less chance of having an eviction, and evictions in general are pretty rare, but that can reduce. I think that's really the key point to this, is having proper screening up front. But in the sense that you do need to evict, I mean, is there any assistance from Avail, or how does that work?
Yeah, good question. At present, no, there are no services for eviction. We know it is a pain point or an area of anxiety for a lot of landlords, but it gets into that area where there's an awful lot of customization and local regulation that is frankly just really hard to automate. And I think our position as a company is we want to put you in a position to not ever get close to that point. But we don't want to necessarily be in the business of, if you do get to that point, helping you with the software and the automation for that. We have a lot of great partners that can help with that, whether it's law firms or digital law firms that we partner with, those types of things. But currently, Avail does not have assistance with that.
Yeah.
Well, you do, though. You just said you've got connections to the lawyers, so you may not be able to do it through the platform, but you've got people who can introduce you to the right people, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's almost like there was a law firm that has people all over the country that help you with leases or something.
Yeah. And it's, we hear a lot of those horror stories. I think there's even some interesting new squatters' rights that are popping up from time to time. And I think, like, when you really think about addressing that topic or issue, the less time you can have your property empty and without a, in a vacancy mode, the lower chance you'll have of dealing with like a squatter right issue where somebody breaks in and all of a sudden you find out that they've been living there for 30 days and you can't get them out. So we really pride ourselves in getting you the renter leads fast and putting them through the screening process such that that transition time is null. In my last 2 transitions I can think of, I already had the renters with the signed lease on the day that the previous renters were moving out. So no vacancy period between the two. So now that's not going to apply to 100% of the cases, but it's been my experience.
Yeah, I think that the main point is, and you hit the nail on the head, is just setting yourself up for success, right, on the front end. So having proper tenant screening, making sure you're investing in a good location, improving the tenant experience. Not only does that, and making it easy for them to renew, making it easy for them to submit maintenance requests and things like that, which I think that is one point we should talk a little bit about, as well as like how maintenance requests are handled. But to me, it's just like, that's how you set yourself up, not only to avoid evictions, but to have the most profitable and productive and easy property, really, right? Where you're not having to deal with unfavorable situations with tenants. Because a lot of the tenant issues that I've seen over time actually isn't always the tenant's fault, right? I mean, a lot of it could be they're frustrated with the management company or the landlord and the lack of communication, the lack of fixing things when they need it done. And they get frustrated too. I think it's important to see it through their eyes of, it is truly a partnership. So the better you can improve their experiences, the better the property is going to operate overall. But before we get into how people can find out about you, Matt, how does maintenance requests work?
Yeah, very simply, if you're familiar with ticket systems, it's very similar. But if you can imagine, the renter has their own portal at Avail, the landlord or yourself has your own portal at Avail. So you have 2 different logins. And the 2 basic use cases for my property are this: either A, my renter discovers something's broken or needs repaired or some maintenance, and they'll log into Avail and simply create that ticket, just a title, description, upload a photo, click done, and I get that notification. I see the details, and now I can communicate back and forth with that person. The other use case is just preventative things. I have a schedule of maintenance that I like to do on my unit, and I'll create those tickets in advance so that my renters know that it's coming, and I'll give them that communication channel through the ticket. And then lastly, you can log all of your receipts, your costs, et cetera, with those maintenance tickets so that they flow into the accounting tool at the end of the year, and you don't have to keep track of those manually. So that's very simply what the maintenance tool is.
Now, does it just spit out a schedule at the end of the year that, you can give to your accountant, I assume?
Very close to it. So we worked with a couple of CPAs to define the product. It is, in our parlance, a bit of a beta product still, where we have, just basic exporting of that information, but it's in the spirit of providing what you need for the scheduling. What you'll probably see coming from Avail is some integrations with third-party tools, with some more formality of that product, so that it does create some of the forms in case you want to download and print them out, or if you want to automatically send them to QuickBooks or TurboTax or vice versa. So more to come on those in the future.
But it will, really the big thing is just having an organized P&L at the end of the year. That you like, here's my income, here's my
income and expenses. Yep.
Right.
Fantastic. Well, the website, we're going to put it up here on the screen, and it will be in the show notes. It's Avail, avail.co, not C-O-M, but C-O, /rent to retirement. And Matt, tell people what they're going to find there, and just kind of, give one last, pitch for Avail, kind of just in general what y'all are doing and what you're hoping to provide to clients.
Yeah, don't overthink it. It is not a scary and hard thing. You could always try it, just one little thing at a time. So go to that link and you'll find an easy path to sign up. We're very big on trust and security, so you will have to go through an authentication flow, but that's an important part of this process, right? We're building a very trustworthy community of landlords and renters, and we have hundreds of thousands of them using it every month. And I'm pure proof that it works, and I spend a couple hours on my property per month at most, and it's a very cash flow positive type of experience. So we hope you enjoy it. And we have the world's best care team here. We have live agents that take phone calls for real and respond to tickets, and they're happy to help you with personalized questions and setup as well.
All right. Fantastic. Well, again, the website, if you're listening, is Avail, avail.co /rent to retirement. Matt, really appreciate you joining us today and talking about this. I know, people don't want to deal with too much hassle, and it sounds like y'all are doing a good job at doing that when it comes to property management, because like Zach and I said earlier, finding the right property manager can be very difficult. Even when we go into markets and vet out managers, sometimes we have to switch them up a few times to figure it out why. And if you really want to take it into your own hands, you can possibly be your best property manager if you decide that's for you. But if you have any questions you want us to pass along to Matt or to answer in future episodes, send them to podcasts@renttoretirement.com. That's podcasts@renttoretirement.com. And of course, if you want to find some properties that you could potentially self-manage yourself, you can head over to renttoretirement.com. That's renttoretirement.com. Really appreciate the time y'all spend educating yourselves today. We'll talk to you on the next episode. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching the Rent to Retirement YouTube channel. Check out some of our other videos, like this one, or this one here.